In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and the hum of ambition never slept, Eleanor Hayes was no ordinary woman. At 52, she was the formidable CEO of Hayes Innovations, a tech empire she had built alongside her late husband, James, from a cramped Brooklyn office to a gleaming tower in Manhattan. The company was a beacon in the cutthroat world of artificial intelligence, crafting algorithms that promised safety, transparency, and trust in an era where data was both currency and weapon. But since James's death 5 years ago in a tragic car accident, Eleanor had carried the weight of that empire alone. To the world, she was sharp, untouchable, always 3 steps ahead of her competitors. Her piercing blue eyes seemed to see through people, her tailored suits a shield against vulnerability. Yet in the sprawling penthouse she called home, the silence was deafening. Success, it turned out, could not fill the void left by love-lost thought. It was July 2025, and New York buzzed with a restless energy. The city was a paradox, glittering with wealth, yet shadowed by inequality. The tech industry, in particular, was at a crossroads. A new federal bill, the AI Transparency Act, loomed over companies like Hayes Innovations, demanding public disclosure of proprietary algorithms to ensure ethical use. For Eleanor, this was both a threat and an opportunity. Her company's AI systems were designed to protect user privacy, a rarity in an industry increasingly criticized for data breaches and exploitation. But competitors, like the ruthless Victor Langston of Langston Tech, saw the bill as a chance to undermine rivals. Langston, a tall man with slick back hair and a smile that never reached his eyes, was rumored to be lobbying regulators to tilt the playing field in his favor. Whispers of his tactics, shady deals, leaked data, and corporate espionage circulated in boardrooms, but no one had caught him in the act. Yet at Hayes Innovations, the 40-story headquarters sparkled under the faded summer sun, its glass facade reflecting the chaos of Manhattan streets. Inside, engineers hunched over monitors, coding algorithms that could predict consumer behavior or detect fraud with eerie precision. The air thrummed with the soft whir of servers and the clatter of keyboards, a symphony of progress. But in the quiet corners of the building, where fluorescent lights flickered and the scent of cleaning solution lingered, worked Jack Carter. At 50, Jack was the kind of man people passed without a second glance. His worn-out baseball cap, faded jeans, and dusty work boots marked him as the janitor, a fixture as unremarkable as the trash bins he emptied. For 20 years, he had swept floors, polished desks, and scrubbed coffee stains from carpets, all while the world of high-stakes tech unfolded around him. Jack didn't mind his invisibility. He liked the simplicity of his job, the rhythm of pushing a broom down empty hallways at dusk. He lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, where the roar of the subway was his lullaby. His life was small, but it was his. Every morning, he rode the train to Manhattan, his cap pulled low, watching the city's kaleidoscope of faces, executives in tailored suits, baristas with tired eyes, students glued to their phones. Jack had a knack for noticing things others missed: a dropped earring under a desk, a crumpled note in the trash, the way a young engineer's shoulders slumped after a harsh review. He never spoke of what he saw, but he stored it away, like pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Eleanor, too, was an observer, though her gaze was sharper, more deliberate. From her corner office on the top floor, she watched her employees like a chess master studying the board. She knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their ambitions, but she kept them at arm's length. After James's death, she had built walls around her heart, letting no one close. The company was her fortress, her legacy, and she guarded it fiercely. Yet, in quiet moments, when the city skyline glowed orange at sunset, she thought of James, the way he laughed, the promises, they made to change the world together. Those memories were her only companions in the empty penthouse, where the clink of her wine glass echoed off marble floors. Jack and Eleanor's worlds rarely intersected, but there were moments, small, fleeting, that hinted at a connection. One evening, months ago, Eleanor had stayed late, poring over financial reports as a storm raged outside. Jack, finishing his rounds, noticed her light still on. He knocked softly, offering to brew her a cup of coffee from the break rooms. "Ancient machine. You don't have to stay this late, Mrs. Hayes," he'd said, his voice gruff but kind. She'd looked up, surprised, her eyes softening for a moment. "Neither do you, Jack," she replied, a rare smile breaking through her guarded exterior. It was a simple exchange, but it lingered in Eleanor's mind. She'd noticed Jack before, how he returned a lost wallet to an intern without fanfare, how he cleaned the office with a quiet pride. He was honest, a quality rarer than gold in her world. Another time, Jack had found a crumpled photo in the trash of young Eleanor and James, laughing at a company picnic years ago. He'd slipped it into an envelope and left it on her desk. Number note, no explanation. When Eleanor found it, her breath caught. She didn't know it was Jack, but the gesture stayed with her, a reminder of the humanity she'd buried under boardroom battles. These moments, small as they were, planted a seed of trust in Eleanor. She began to see Jack not as a janitor, but as someone who saw the world clearly, unclouded by ambition or deceit. The tech world, meanwhile, was anything but clear. In 2025, AI was both savior and villain. Headlines screamed about data leaks, with companies like Nexus Corp exposed for selling user information to advertisers. Public trust in tech was eroding, and the AI Transparency Act was Congress's attempt to rein it in. For Hayes Innovations, the bill was a double-edged sword. Compliance could expose their proprietary algorithms, but defiance could tank their reputation. Victor Langston, ever the opportunist, was pushing for stricter regulations, knowing smaller firms would struggle to comply. His own company, Langston Tech, was rumored to be skirting ethical boundaries, using AI to manipulate consumer data in ways that violated the spirit, if not the letter, of the law. Eleanor knew Langston was circling, waiting for her to slip. As summer heated up, so did the stakes. Langston Tech proposed a strategic partnership with Hayes Innovations, a deal that promised shared resources and market dominance. On paper, it was a win-win. But Eleanor's instincts, honed by years of navigating corporate sharks, told her otherwise. Langston's charm was too polished, his promises too perfect. She'd seen his type before, men who smiled while slipping. A knife between your ribs. The deal was set to be finalized at a high-stakes meeting in 2 days, and Eleanor was determined to uncover Langston's true intentions. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed someone outside the echo chamber of executives and analysts, someone who could see what she might miss. That someone, improbably, was Jack Carter. As he pushed his mop down the hallway that evening, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows, Eleanor watched him from her office. She remembered James's words, "The people who matter most are the ones no one notices." Jack was one of those people. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to step into a world far bigger than the one he'd known, a world of power, deception, and a chance to change everything. Below is the detailed implementation of Part 2, the unexpected choice for the expanded story, written in English, targeting approximately 1,500 words as outlined in the detailed plan. The narrative maintains the engaging, vivid, and emotionally resonant style of the original and Part 1, focusing on the pivotal moment when Eleanor Hayes invites Jack Carter to join the high-stakes meeting with Langston Tech. This part builds on the foundation laid in Part 1, emphasizing Jack's internal conflict, Eleanor's trust in him, and the growing tension around the upcoming meeting. It incorporates contemporary elements like the pressures of the AI industry in 2025, and ensures logical progression without overlapping with other parts. If the content risks exceeding the word count, I'll split it into smaller segments while maintaining the total word count for part 2. I'll also ensure the narrative remains compelling, with rich imagery, natural dialogue, and subtle foreshadowing to keep readers hooked. The sun had dipped below the Manhattan skyline, painting the Hayes Innovations Tower in shades of amber and indigo. Inside, the office was a ghost town, the hum of computers replaced by the soft creak of Jack Carter's mop gliding across the polished floor. It was 7:30 p.m., and most employees had long since fled to their happy hours or subway commutes. Jack liked these quiet hours, when the chaos of the day gave way to stillness. He moved methodically, his worn-out baseball cap casting a shadow under the fluorescent lights, his hands steady from years of routine. The scent of pine cleaner lingered in the air, a familiar comfort. But tonight, something felt different, a tension he couldn't quite place. Like the air before a storm. Jack was wiping down a conference table when he heard footsteps, sharp and deliberate, echoing down the hallway. He glanced up, expecting a late working engineer or a security guard. Instead, it was Eleanor Hayes. Her tailored blazer and silver hair caught the light, making her look like a figure from a painting, untouchable yet weary. Jack straightened, clutching the mop handle, suddenly aware of his dusty boots and faded flannel shirt. Eleanor rarely ventured to this part of the building after hours. Had he missed a spot? Left a trash bin overflowing? His mind raced, searching for a mistake. "Jack," she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of purpose. It wasn't the tone of a reprimand, but it still made his heart skip. "Can we talk for a moment?" Jack blinked, his calloused fingers tightening around the mop. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," he replied, his voice rough from disuse. He set the mop against the wall and pulled off his cap out of habit, revealing a mess of graying hair. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor's lips curved into a faint smile, not the polished one she used in boardrooms, but something softer, almost personal. "Nothing's wrong," she said, stepping closer. Her eyes, sharp as ever, studied him not with judgment, but with a curiosity that made Jack shift uncomfortably. "I need your help with something important." Jack's brow furrowed. "Help?" He was the guy who scrubbed coffee stains and unclogged paper shredders. What could Eleanor Hayes, the queen of Hayes Innovations, possibly need from him? "I'm not sure I follow, ma'am," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm just the janitor." Eleanor's smile deepened, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "You're more than that, Jack. I've seen how you work, how you notice things others miss. You're honest. That's rarer than you think in this business." She paused, her gaze drifting to the window, where the city lights flickered like distant stars. "There's a meeting tomorrow with Langston Tech. It's a big one. I'd like you to be there with me." The words hit Jack like a freight train. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. A meeting? With Langston Tech? He'd heard the name whispers about Victor Langston's ruthless tactics floated through the office like smoke. But Jack didn't belong in that world of gloss-walled conference rooms and million-dollar deals. He pictured himself surrounded by executives in crisp suits, their jargon flying over his head: algorithms, synergies, market shares. He'd stick out like a smudge on a polished window. "Me?" He finally managed, his voice cracking. "Mrs. Hayes, I don't know anything about business meetings. I clean floors. I empty trash. I don't even own a tie." Eleanor's expression didn't waver. She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the floor. "I'm not asking you to talk about revenue projections or wear a fancy suit," she said. "I need someone who can see things clearly, someone who won't be swayed by smooth talk or big promises. You've been here for years, Jack. You've seen how this place runs, how people act when they think no one's watching. I trust you." Trust. The word hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Jack's mind spun. He'd spent his life fading into the background, unnoticed by the engineers and analysts who rushed past him every day. He'd grown used to it, even found comfort in it. But here was Eleanor Hayes, the most powerful woman he'd ever met, saying she trusted him. Him, Jack Carter, who hadn't finished high school, who lived paycheck to paycheck in a shoebox apartment. It didn't make sense. Why me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He regretted the question instantly, afraid it sounded ungrateful. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She leaned against the conference table, her fingers tracing its edge. My husband, James, used to say the best insights come from the people know. One notices, she said, her voice softening. He talked to everyone, janitors, interns, security guards. He believed they saw the truth of a place, the things executives miss in their rush to climb the ladder. Her eyes flickered with a shadow of grief, but she pressed on. I've watched you, Jack. You found that photo of James and me in the trash last year and left it on my desk. You didn't have to do that. And when Sarah, the intern, lost her wallet, you turned it in without a second thought. You're honest, and you're observant. That's why I need you tomorrow. Jack's throat tightened. He remembered that photo Eleanor and James, laughing under a summer sky, so different from the guarded woman before him. He hadn't meant for anyone to know he'd found it. And the wallet? Just the right thing to do. But the idea that Eleanor had noticed that she'd been watching him the way he watched others unsettled him. He wasn't used to being seen. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Outside, a siren wailed, a reminder of the city's restless pulse. Jack's mind drifted to a memory of James Hayes, years ago, stopping to chat with him in the break room. Good work, Jack, James had said, clapping him on the shoulder. This place wouldn't shine without you. It was a small moment, but it had stuck with Jack, a flicker of pride in a life of routine. Now, Eleanor was offering him something bigger, a chance to step out of the shadows. But the thought terrified him. What if he failed? What if he embarrassed her or himself? I don't know, ma'am, he said, twisting his cap in his hands. I'm not the right guy for this. I'd probably mess it up. Eleanor's eyes held his, steady and unyielding. You won't, she said firmly. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. Just be there, watch, and tell me what you see. That's enough. Jack swallowed hard. A part of him wanted to say no, to retreat to the safety of his mop and his quiet life. But another part, a small, stubborn voice deep inside, whispered that this was a chance to be more than the guy who cleaned up after everyone else. What if Eleanor was right? What if he could make a difference, just by being himself? The year 2025 had brought new pressures to Hayes Innovations. The AI Transparency Act was stirring up controversy, with tech giants like Langston Tech pushing for regulations that would burden smaller competitors. Victor Langston's proposal for a partnership had come at a suspicious time, just as Hayes Innovations was navigating a PR storm over a recent data breach at a rival company. Eleanor knew Langston's charm was a facade, hiding motives she couldn't yet prove. She needed an outsider's perspective, someone untainted by the corporate game. Jack, with his quiet observance and unassuming honesty, was her wild card. All right, Jack said at last, his voice barely audible. I'll do it. Eleanor's face softened, a rare warmth breaking through her composed exterior. Thank you, Jack, she said. I promise you won't regret it. As she turned and walked away, her heels echoing in the empty hallway, Jack stood frozen, his cap clutched tightly in his hands. Tomorrow, he'd walk into a world he didn't belong to, a world of power and deception with one of the most influential women in New York by his side. He had no idea what was coming, but for the first time in years, Jack Carter felt the weight of possibility and the fear of what it might cost. The fluorescent lights in Jack Carter's Queens apartment flickered as he stood before a cracked mirror, fumbling with the collar of an old button-down shirt. It was the only one he owned, a faded blue thing he hadn't worn since his cousin's wedding a decade ago. The fabric felt stiff, alien against his skin, a far cry from the soft flannel he wore while mopping the floors of Hayes Innovations. His reflection stared back, graying hair, weathered lines around his eyes, a man who looked out of place even in his own home. Tomorrow, he'd step into a world that felt even more foreign, a high-stakes meeting with Eleanor Hayes and the Sharks. From Langston Tech, the thought made his stomach churn. Jack Carter, a janitor, in a room full of suits? It was absurd, like a mouse invited to a lion's den. He adjusted his worn-out baseball cap, a habit when nerves got the better of him, and muttered to himself, "What am I doing?" The apartment was small, cluttered with second-hand furniture and stacks of old magazines. A single window let in the orange glow of a street lamp, accompanied by the distant rumble of the 7 train. Jack's life had always been simple work: eat, sleep, repeat. He'd never asked for more, never dreamed of being anything but the guy who kept the office clean. But Eleanor's words from last night echoed in his mind. Asterisk, I trust you. Jack. Asterisk trust. It was a word that carried weight when he wasn't sure he could bear. Across the river, in her Manhattan penthouse, Eleanor Hayes sat at a sleek glass desk, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city's glittering skyline. The room was pristine marble floors, minimalist furniture, a single framed photo of her and James on their 10th anniversary. She stared at a stack of documents about Langston Tech's proposed partnership, her sharp eyes scanning numbers and clauses. The deal promised shared AI resources, a unified front against the looming AI Transparency Act that threatened to expose their proprietary algorithms. But something about Victor Langston's proposal didn't add up. The numbers were too clean, the promises too grand. Eleanor had built Hayes Innovations on instinct as much as intellect, and her instincts screamed that Langston was playing a game she hadn't yet cracked. She leaned back in her chair, sipping a glass of red wine, and thought of James. He'd always had a knack for seeing through people, for finding truth in the quiet moments others overlooked. Trust the ones who don't chase the spotlight, he'd said once, laughing as he chatted with a security guard during a late-night strategy session. That's why she'd chosen Jack. He was invisible to the corporate world, but to Eleanor, he was a mirror of the values she and James had built their company on: honesty, diligence, humanity. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about numbers. It was a battle of wits, and she needed someone who could see what she might miss. Back in Queens, Jack paced his tiny living room, his boots scuffing the worn linoleum. He thought about the office, the way the engineers and executives moved with purpose, their voices filled with words he didn't understand: asterisk machine learning, data pipelines, neural networks. Asterisk, he'd overheard enough to know Hayes Innovations was under pressure. The news was full of stories about the AI Transparency Act, with pundits arguing over whether it would protect consumers or cripple innovation. A recent scandal at Nexus Corp, where user data was leaked to political advertisers, had only fueled the fire. Jack didn't follow the details, but he'd seen the tension in the office late-night meetings, whispered arguments, the way employees glanced nervously at their monitors. Whatever Langston Tech wanted, it wasn't just a partnership. Jack wasn't educated, but he wasn't naive. People like Victor Langston didn't play fair. He stopped pacing and sank onto his couch, the springs creaking under his weight. His mind drifted to a memory of James Hayes, years ago, stopping by the janitor's closet to thank him for staying late to clean up after a company party. "You're the backbone of this place, Jack," James had said, his smile genuine. Jack had brushed it off, embarrassed, but the words had stayed with him. Now, Eleanor was asking him to be more than a backbone. She was asking him to stand beside her in a room where he didn't belong. The thought made his palms sweat. What if he said the wrong thing? What if he made a fool of himself and let her down? At Hayes Innovations, the morning sun streamed through the glass walls, illuminating a hive of activity. Engineers typed furiously, their screens glowing with lines of code. A young programmer, Mia, muttered about debugging an algorithm, while a senior manager barked orders about preparing for the Langston meeting. The air was thick with anticipation, tinged with unease. Rumors swirled that a deal with Langston Tech could lead to layoffs, especially for entry-level staff replaced by automated systems. The AI boom of 2025 had created wealth, but it had also widened the gap between the tech elite and everyone else. Jack felt it every time he walked through the office, invisible to the people who built the future. Eleanor, meanwhile, was in her office, meeting with her chief of staff, Daniel. He was skeptical about her decision to involve Jack. With all due respect, Eleanor, why bring the janitor? He asked, adjusting his glasses. This is Langston we're dealing with. We need analysts, not cleaners. Eleanor's gaze was steely. Daniel, you see numbers. Jack sees people. That's what I need right now. She didn't elaborate, but her tone shut down further questions. After Daniel left, she called Jack to her office. He arrived, cap in hand, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Jack, she said, standing to greet him. I know this feels out of your depth, but you're not here to play their game. Just watch, listen, and tell me what you see. She handed him a simple navy blazer, borrowed from a junior employee's spare closet. Try this on. It's not a suit, but it'll do. Jack took the blazer, his fingers brushing the smooth fabric. It felt like a costume, but Eleanor's confidence steadied him. Mrs. Hayes, he said hesitantly, why are you so sure I can help? And nobody special. Eleanor's expression softened, a rare vulnerability flickering across her face. When James and I started this company, we promised to build something honest. He always said the heart of a place lies in the people who keep it running, that no one notices. You remind me of that, Jack. You're not nobody. You're the kind of person this company was built for. Jack swallowed, his throat tight. He didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded, slipping the blazer over his shoulders. It fit better than he expected, but he still felt like an imposter. As he left Eleanor's office, the weight of her words settled over him. She wasn't just asking him to sit in a meeting, she was asking him to honor a legacy. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Outside, New York buzzed with its usual chaos taxis honking, street vendors shouting, the city alive with ambition and struggle. Jack walked to the subway, the blazer folded carefully in his bag. Tomorrow, he'd step into a world of power and deception, armed only with his instincts and Eleanor's trust. He didn't know if he was ready, but for the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose. Whatever happened, he wouldn't let her down. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hayes Innovations' top-floor conference room, casting a golden glow over the polished mahogany table and sleek leather chairs. The room screamed wealth and power, its view of Manhattan's skyline a reminder of the stakes at play. Jack Carter stood at the threshold, his borrowed navy blazer stiff on his shoulders, his worn-out baseball cap left behind in his locker. His hands were clammy, his heart thudding like a drum. He'd spent 20 years cleaning this building, but stepping into this room felt like crossing into another world. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and the faint buzz of anticipation, as if the walls themselves knew something big was about to happen. Eleanor Hayes sat at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back, her tailored suit as sharp as her gaze. She exuded calm authority, her blue eyes scanning the room like a general before battle. Across from her was Victor Langston, CEO of Langston Tech, his slick back hair and tailored black suit giving him the air of a man who owned every room he entered. His smile was all teeth, confident to the point of arrogance, but his eyes darted occasionally to his assistant, Claire Monroe, a cold, efficient woman who scribbled notes with mechanical precision. A handful of executives from both companies filled the remaining seats, their laptops open, their faces taut with the weight of the moment. Jack, standing awkwardly near the door, felt their glances brief, dismissive, as if wondering why the janitor was here. He kept his head down, wishing he could blend into the walls. Eleanor had told him to observe, to watch for anything out of place. But as the meeting began, Jack felt like a fish out of water. Victor Langston launched into his pitch, his voice smooth as polished glass. "This partnership," he said, gesturing to a sleek presentation projected on the screen, "will position Hayes Innovations and Langston Tech as leaders in the AI revolution. By integrating our platforms, we'll dominate the market and navigate the AI Transparency Act with ease." The screen flashed with charts, revenue projections, market shares, buzzwords like synergistic data ecosystems and cross-platform optimization. Jack's head spun. He didn't understand the jargon, but he recognized the cadence of a salesman, the kind who could sell ice to a glacier. Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable, her fingers steepled. She asked pointed questions about data security, intellectual property, compliance with the new federal regulations. Langston answered effortlessly, his responses laced with technical terms that made the executives nod approvingly. But Jack noticed something in Langston's delivery, a slight hesitation when Eleanor pressed him on data privacy, a quick glance at Claire, who shifted in her seat. It was subtle, but Jack had spent years watching people, catching the flickers of truth they didn't mean to show. Something wasn't right. As Langston droned on, Jack's eyes wandered around the table. The executives were engrossed, typing notes or nodding along. Claire's pen moved furiously, her face a mask of focus. Langston's sleek black briefcase sat beside him, its surface gleaming under the lights. Then Jack saw in a corner of paper, peeking out from under the briefcase, tucked just out of sight. It wasn't part of the neat stack of documents being discussed. It looked deliberate, hidden. Jack's pulse quickened. Was it nothing? A stray note? A coffee-stained memo? Or was it something more? His instincts, honed from years of noticing lost keys and forgotten wallets, told him it mattered. The room grew hotter, the tension palpable. Langston was pushing now, his voice rising as he outlined the benefits of the deal. "This is a win-win. Eleanor," he said, leaning forward, his smile almost predatory. "Sign today, and we'll be unstoppable." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't respond. Instead, she glanced at Jack, a fleeting look that carried a silent question. Asterisk, what do you see? Jack's throat tightened. He imagined speaking up, pointing to the paper, only to be laughed out of the room. He was nobody here, a janitor in a borrowed blazer. But Eleanor's trust weighed on him, heavy as the city itself. Langston's assistant, Claire, passed him a folder, her movements precise but nervous. Jack caught the way her eyes flicked to the briefcase, as if checking it was still in place. His heart pounded louder. The paper wasn't an accident, it was hidden for a reason. He thought of Eleanor, alone in her penthouse, fighting to protect the company she and James had built. He thought of James, who'd once called him the backbone of the place. If he stayed silent, he'd be letting them both down. The room was a pressure cooker now, every word charged. Langston leaned back, confident he'd won. Eleanor's questions grew sharper, probing gaps in his proposal, but he deflected with charm. Jack's eyes kept returning to the paper. His palms were slick with sweat, his mind a tug-of-war between fear and duty. What if he was wrong? What if he humiliated Eleanor? But what if he was right, and this was the key to unraveling? Langston's game? Finally, he couldn't hold back. Excuse me, Jack said, his voice shaky, cutting through the room like a cracked bell. Every head turned, eyes wide with surprise or annoyance. Langston's smile faltered, his gaze narrowing. Claire froze, her pen hovering. Jack pointed, his hand trembling. There's something under the briefcase. A paper. It's not with the others. Maybe you should take a look. The room went silent, the kind of silence that sucks the air out. Langston's face tightened, his hand inching toward the briefcase as if to cover it. It's nothing, he said quickly, his voice too smooth. Just a draft, probably. But his eyes betrayed him cold, calculating, caught off guard. Claire's pen dropped, clattering on the table. Eleanor's gaze locked onto the briefcase, her expression unreadable, but her posture rigid. Move the briefcase, Victor, Eleanor said, her voice low and commanding, like steel wrapped in silk. Langston hesitated, his smirk gone. Slowly, he slid the briefcase aside, revealing a single sheet of paper, folded once, its edges worn. Eleanor reached for it, her movements deliberate. The room held its breath as she unfolded it, her eyes scanning the text. Jack watched her face, searching for a sign. For a moment, nothing, just a soft rustle of paper. Then her eyes widened, a flicker of anger crossing her features, quickly replaced by a steely calm. Victor, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. This isn't a draft. It's a side agreement, one you didn't intend for me to see. She held up the document, her hand steady. It transfers control of our core AI algorithms to Langston Tech, buried in fine print about shared resources, and it bypasses the Transparency Act's data protections, exposing our users' information. The words landed like a gavel, sharp and final. Langston's face paled, his confident facade crumbling. Claire stared at her notepad, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Jack's heart raced. He'd been right. The paper was a trap, a betrayal disguised as partnership. He glanced at Eleanor, who gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes gleaming with gratitude. The executives murmured, their shock rippling through the room. Langston stammered, Eleanor, this is a misunderstanding. That document was never meant to. Enough. Eleanor cut him off, her voice icy. This meeting is over. We'll be taking this to the board and the regulators. She stood, her presence commanding, and the room seemed to shrink around her. Langston's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, gathering his papers with shaking hands. Claire followed, her face a mask of defeat. As the Langston team left, the room buzzed with whispers. Jack stood frozen, his pulse still pounding. He'd done it, he'd seen what no one else had, and he'd spoken up. Eleanor turned to him, her expression softening. Thank you, Jack, she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made his chest ache. You saw what I couldn't. Jack nodded, unable to find words. He was still just a janitor, but in that moment, he felt like something more. The city outside sparkled, oblivious to the battle won within these walls. But for Jack and Eleanor, everything had changed. The conference room at Hayes Innovations was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant clatter of Manhattan traffic 30 stories below. The Langston Tech team had left, their footsteps echoing down the hall like a retreating storm. Victor Langston's confident smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl as he and his assistant, Claire Monroe, hurried out with their briefcases. The hidden document, a damning side agreement that would have handed over Hayes Innovations' core, algorithms, and exposed user data lay on the mahogany table. Its creased edges, a testament to Jack Carter's unlikely heroism. Jack stood near the door, his borrowed navy blazer slightly askew, his heart still racing from the moment he'd spoken up. He felt the weight of every eye in the room, but for once, they weren't dismissive glances. They were looks of surprise, even respect. Eleanor Hayes remained seated, her posture regal, but her eyes blazing with a quiet fury. She held the document, her fingers steady, as she addressed the remaining executives. "This meeting is adjourned," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss next steps. In the meantime, this document goes to our legal team and the regulators." Her gaze flicked to Jack, a subtle nod conveying more gratitude than words could. The executives gathered there, laptops murmuring among themselves as they filed out, casting curious glances at the janitor who turned the tide. Jack lingered, unsure if he should leave or stay. His hands fidgeted, itching for the familiar grip of his mop handle. The room felt too grand, too polished, like a stage he didn't belong on. But Eleanor's voice stopped him. "Jack," she said softly, rising from her chair. "Stay a moment." Her tone was warm, a stark contrast to the steel she'd wielded against Langston. The door clicked shut behind the last executive, leaving them alone in the vast room. The city skyline glittering through the windows. Jack turned, his boots scuffing the polished floor. "Mrs. Hayes, I didn't mean to cause a scene," he stammered, his voice rough. "I just saw that paper and thought it looked wrong." Eleanor's lips curved into a smile, not the calculated one she used in negotiations, but something genuine, tinged with relief. "You didn't cause a scene, Jack. You saved us." She stepped closer, holding the document. "This wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate attempt to undermine everything we've built. If you hadn't spoken up, we'd be signing away our future and our users' trust." Her eyes, usually so guarded, softened. "You saw what none of us did." "Thank you." Jack's throat tightened. He wasn't used to praise, let alone from someone like Eleanor. For 20 years, he'd been the guy who faded into the background, cleaning up coffee spills and emptying trash bins while the world of AI and algorithms spun around him. Now, the most powerful woman in the room was thanking him. "I was just doing what you asked," he said, shrugging, his cheeks flushing. "Watching like you said." Eleanor shook her head. "It's more than that. You trusted your instincts, even when you were scared. That's not something you learn in a boardroom." She paused, her gaze drifting to the photo of her and James. On her desk, a rare personal touch in her office. "James would have liked you, Jack. He always believed in people like you. The ones who keep things running, who see the truth because they're not chasing glory." The mention of James hit Jack like a memory he hadn't dusted off in years. He remembered James Hayes stopping by the janitor's closet, offering a kind word or a handshake when no one else bothered. "He was a good man," Jack said quietly. "Always treated me like I mattered. I didn't know him well, but I could tell." His voice faltered, and he looked away, embarrassed by the emotion creeping in. Eleanor's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. "He did. And today, you honored that." She set the document down and leaned against the table, her composure softening. "I'd been alone in this fight for a long time, Jack. After James died, I thought I had to do it all myself, keep the company alive, keep his vision alive. But today, you reminded me I don't have to." Jack didn't know how to respond. He'd never thought of himself as part of anyone's vision, let alone a company like Hayes Innovations. But Eleanor's words stirred something in him, a flicker of pride, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he was more than a guy with the mop. "I'm just glad I didn't mess it up," he said, managing a small smile. Eleanor laughed, a rare sound that warmed the room. "You did far more than that. I'd like you to consider something, Jack. I need someone I can trust to keep an eye on things, not just the floors. but the people, an unofficial advisor, if you will. Someone to tell me when I'm missing the obvious. Would you be willing? Jack's mouth opened, then closed. An advisor? Him? The idea was as foreign as the blazer on his shoulders. Mrs. Hayes, I'm not sure I'm cut out for that, he said, twisting his hands. I don't know anything about AI or business. You know honesty, she replied firmly. That's enough for now. She extended her hand, a gesture both formal and heartfelt. Jack hesitated, then shook it, his callous palm meeting her smooth one. It felt like a pact, a bridge between their worlds. The fallout from the meeting rippled through the tech world like a shockwave. By the next morning, Hayes Innovations had issued a statement condemning Langston Tech's deceptive tactics, and the hidden document was with the legal team, poised to be sent to federal regulators. The AI Transparency Act, already a hot topic in 2025, made the story a media magnet. A New York Times article headlined, "Ethics Over Ambition. Hayes Innovations Exposes Rival Scheme," praised Eleanor's leadership, though Jack's role remained a quiet footnote. Social media buzzed with speculation about Langston Tech's practices, with hashtags like #AIEthics and #DataTrust trending. Langston's stock dipped, and whispers of a SEC investigation began to circulate. In an industry reeling from data scandals, Hayes Innovations emerged as a beacon of integrity. Inside the company, the mood was different. The executives who'd once ignored Jack now nodded as he passed, their curiosity tinged with respect. Mia, the young programmer, even stopped him in the break room to say, "Heard you saved the day, Jack. That's pretty badass." Jack ducked his head, embarrassed but warmed by the words. He still wore his old flannel and cap, still pushed his mop down the halls, but something had shifted. He walked a little taller, his steps less hesitant. For the first time, he felt like he belonged not just in the building, but in the story of Hayes Innovations. Eleanor, too, was changing. The meeting had exposed not just Langston's deceit, but her own isolation. She'd spent years keeping everyone at arm's length, afraid that vulnerability would weaken her. But Jack's courage had cracked that armor. She began holding open forums, inviting employees from every level, engineers, INTRNs, even the maintenance staff, to share ideas. The first forum was awkward, with skeptical glances and hesitant voices. But Eleanor listened, her notebook filled with suggestions. She even invited Jack, who sat quietly in the back, marveling at the shift. The company felt less like a machine and more like a community, a reflection of the vision she and James had once shared. In the weeks that followed, Jack wrestled with Eleanor's offer. An advisor? It sounded ridiculous, but he couldn't shake the pride he'd felt in that conference room. He thought of his life in Queens, the simplicity he'd always cherished. Could he step into something bigger without losing himself? One evening, as he swept the lobby, he caught his reflection in the glass doors, not just a janitor, but a man who'd made a difference. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He wasn't invisible anymore. Eleanor, watching from her office above, saw Jack's reflection too. She thought of James, of the promises they'd made to build a company that valued people over profit. For the first time since his death, she felt a spark of hope, not just for Hayes Innovations, but for herself. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Jack, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. The late afternoon sun bathed the Hayes Innovations Tower in a golden haze, its glass facade reflecting the restless pulse of New York City. Jack Carter stood outside, his worn-out baseball cap pulled low, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his faded flannel. The borrowed blazer from the meeting with Langston Tech was back in the locker room, replaced by his familiar work clothes. Yet something was different. As he looked up at the towering building, its windows glinting like 1,000 eyes, he didn't feel like the invisible janitor anymore. For the first time in 20 years, Jack felt seen, not just by Eleanor Hayes, but by himself. Inside, the office buzzed with a new energy. The fallout from the Langston Tech meeting had rippled far beyond the conference room. The New York Times had published a follow-up piece, The Unlikely Hero Behind Hayes' Innovation Stand, mentioning Jack by name, a quiet janitor who'd uncovered a corporate scheme. Social media amplified the story, with posts praising Hayes' innovation's commitment to ethics in an industry plagued by scandals. The hashtag AI ethics hashtag trended for days, and Jack, to his quiet embarrassment, became a minor folk hero online. The janitor who saved AI, one tweet called him. Though he'd never touched a smartphone in his life, he didn't seek the spotlight, but it found him, casting a soft glow on a life he'd always thought small. Jack's days hadn't changed much on the surface. He still swept the floors, emptied trash bins, and nodded politely to the engineers rushing past. But the nods were different. Now some came with smiles, others with a quiet respect. Mia, the young programmer, had slipped him a coffee one morning, saying, "You're kind of a legend, Jack." He ducked his head, muttering a thank you, but the warmth lingered. At home in his Queens apartment, he caught himself staring at the cracked mirror, wondering who this man was who'd stood up in a room full of power and made a difference. Eleanor's offer to be an unofficial advisor still hung in the air, a possibility he hadn't yet accepted. It scared him, the idea of stepping out of his comfort zone, but it also sparked something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Eleanor, too, was changing. The walls she'd built since James's death, walls of steel and solitude, were beginning to crack. The open forum she'd started after the meeting had become a regular event, with employees from every level sharing ideas over coffee in the break room. A maintenance worker suggested better recycling protocols. An intern proposed a mentorship program for underrepresented groups in tech. Eleanor listened, her notebook filling with notes, her guarded demeanor softening. She'd always prided herself on her sharpness, her ability to stay 3 steps ahead. But she realized now that leadership wasn't just about strategy, it was about connection. Jack had reminded her of that, of the vision she and James had once shared, a company built on people, not just profits. One evening, as the office emptied and the city lights began to twinkle, Eleanor called Jack to her office. He arrived, cap in hand, his boots leaving faint scuffs on the marble floor. The room was bathed in the soft glow of sunset, the photo of Eleanor and James on their desk catching the light. "Jack," she said, standing by the window, "I owe you more than thanks. You didn't just save the company, you reminded me why I'm here." Her voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability in it, a crack in the armor she'd worn for years. Jack shifted, uncomfortable with the weight of her words. "I just did what you asked, Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice gruff. "I saw something and spoke up. Anyone could have done it." "No," Eleanor said firmly, turning to face him. "Not anyone. You saw the truth because you weren't caught up in the noise numbers, egos, agendas. That's a gift, Jack, and it's why I need you to keep doing it. Not just for me, but for all of us." She gestured to the city beyond the window, its skyline a testament to ambition and struggle. "This company, this industry, it's changing fast. We need people like you to keep us grounded." Jack swallowed, his hands twisting his cap. He thought of his life, the quiet evenings in Queens, the subway rides, the simplicity he'd always cherished. Could he be more without losing that? "I'm still thinking about your offer," he admitted. "It's a lot. I'm not sure I'm the guy you think I am." Eleanor smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "You're exactly who I think you are. Take your time, Jack. The offer stands." She extended her hand, and he shook it, his callous palm meeting hers in a gesture that felt like a promise. As he left, he glanced back, seeing her silhouette against the skyline, a woman no longer alone in her fight. Weeks later, Jack stood outside the Hayes Innovations Tower again, the autumn air crisp against his skin. The media frenzy had quieted, but the impact lingered. Hayes Innovations was thriving, its reputation bolstered by its stand against Langston Tech. The SEC investigation into Victor Langston's practices was gaining traction, with rumors of data privacy violations piling up. Eleanor had become vocal advocate for ethical AI, speaking at conferences and pushing for transparency that balanced innovation with accountability. Jack, meanwhile, had started attending the forums, sitting quietly in the back, listening to ideas and occasionally offering a thought, small at first, but always honest. He hadn't taken the advisor role yet, but he was beginning to believe. He could dot. As he looked up at the tower, Jack felt a shift inside him. He was still the janitor, still the man who rode the 7 train and lived in a cluttered apartment. But he was also someone who'd made a difference, someone who'd been trusted and seen. For the first time, he believed in himself, not as a hero, but as a man with something to give. The city stretched out before him, its lights a promise of possibility. Whatever came next, he was ready. This story of Jack Carter and Eleanor Hayes is more than a tale of corporate intrigue. It's a celebration of the human spirit. At its core, it reminds us that value lies not in titles or wealth, but in honesty, courage, and the quiet acts that shape the world. Jack, a janitor overlooked by many, proves that anyone can change the course of events by trusting their instincts and standing up for what's right. Eleanor, a powerful CEO, learns that leadership is strongest when it embraces vulnerability and trusts others, even though society deems ordinary. Their unlikely partnership bridges the gap between worlds, showing that trust and respect can transcend class, status, and circumstance. In 2025, as we navigate the complexities of AI, data privacy, and social inequality, this story is a beacon. It challenges us to look beyond appearances, to value the unseen contributions of those around us, and to build communities, whether in companies or cities, that prioritize people over profit. Jack's courage teaches us to speak up, even when we doubt ourselves. Eleanor's transformation reminds us that no one is too powerful to need others. Together, they show that the smallest voices can echo the loudest truths. If this story moved you, there's more to discover. Legacy Stories brings you tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of our shared humanity. Subscribe to our channel to join a community that celebrates these moments and never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. Click the button, share your thoughts, and let's keep the legacy of human connection alive.